Probably you haven't been exposed to any linguistics. Maybe one or two people here have had some. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of a taste for what linguists do and what linguistics is about through this particular angle of becoming aware of things that are generally unconscious when we speak our language. There are two ways you can think about language. Oh, am I blocking the, was I blocking that? Good. Two ways you can think about language. You can think of it as a cultural artifact, which is the way most English teachers in school treat it. That is, our illustrious ancestors, Shakespeare, made up all these wonderful words and ways of saying things, and we inherit this and have to preserve it and so on, like a cultural artifact, which would be things like a stone axe, a computer, a recipe, a dance, are things that you learn. You either learn them in school or you learn, people make them and you learn how to make them if you're interested in that. The other way is language as a natural phenomenon, which means part of the world that we can investigate as scientists. And in that case, it would be something not like dancing, but like walking. So if you think about it, all healthy human beings above the age of about 1 walk. And walking is pretty much the same everywhere, sometimes a little faster or a little slower, but it's essentially the same. While dancing is different in every community, and even within a community, there could be many different styles of dancing. You learn them by observing other people and possibly consciously learning the steps and movements of a dance. So those are two ways of thinking about language. So the cultural artifact way is very prevalent in our society and schools. The natural phenomenon way is the one that I want to introduce to you as a linguist. So is language more like dancing or more like walking? So what do you think?
Walking.
Walking, because?
For me, because I'm very good with language.
So it comes naturally to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like dancing, especially like as someone who's learned another language before. Even though it does naturally, you've been like exposed to an environment, it's because this environment is kind of teaching you the language. So you're even unconsciously learning it as any other subject.
But learning it from external input of some kind. Yeah, so I think we have to, ultimately agree that it's both like walking and it's like dancing. That is, it's a natural phenomenon and it's cultural because no matter where your own personal genetic makeup is from, whatever country your ancestors came from, if you're in an English-speaking environment, you will learn English like everybody else. And if you're in a Russian-speaking environment, you'll be speaking Russian like everybody else. So that's the input part of it. But your ability to acquire a language unconsciously, effortlessly, as children do, is what we're thinking about when we talk about language as a natural phenomenon. No matter how much you expose an animal to any kind of animal, their ability to learn what we think of as language, which is a whole different subject for a different lecture, but their ability to learn that is nothing like a 2-year-old human being. So there's something special about the human brain that enables us to learn language in that effortless and essentially complete and perfect way. So I'm saying that it's both. So why linguistics as a science, especially for students, especially for introducing the idea of science? Because the data is all around us. The data is easy to get. You can observe people speaking anytime you want. You can read whatever you want that people have created in their language. There are more elaborate techniques that I'll talk about in a moment, but basically you don't need a laboratory to gather linguistic data. Yet you can apply the same analytical methods that any other science would use once you think about that, start to think about that data. So it's a really good way to introduce students to how to do science without necessarily learning how to mix things in a lab or build equipment. So just a list of some of the techniques that different linguists use. I'm not going to read through it. You can read through the list. Some of these are very recent. Neuroimaging is probably within the last 20 years or so and is getting better and better and more useful every year nowadays. My department has gone in big for computational and mathematical. Oh, question. Mathematical methods in the last 5 years or so? Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Is that going to be okay if I move over a little? Oh, okay. Okay, good. Hmm? The cup is out. I don't care if the cup is out. But yeah, that's the boundary, or somewhere there is the boundary. Okay, good. So those are some methods. The only one that we're going to use today is the last one, which is introspection, thinking about, would I say this or would I not say that? That's an easy approach. Just an elementary step towards noticing that you have unconscious knowledge of your language. By the way, let me ask first, how many of you have a language other than English as your first or basic childhood language? Okay, almost everybody. Let me ask, how many of those are Russian? How many of those are a language other than Russian? Okay, what are the languages? I know yours, yeah? Sorry? Mandarin? Czech. Okay, so a good variety of languages there, yeah. So for people who are not, I mean, all of you are good speakers of English, but if you're not a native speaker of English, some of these intuitions might not come as easily to you as to someone who was learning English from first language. Okay, you can say I eat an apple, and you want to add the phrase every day. And in principle, there are, 1, 2, 3, 4 different spots where it could go in the sentence. So I want you to think for a moment of the 4 different spots, which ones are legitimate in English? Okay, everybody think about it for a moment. I'll call on some people. 1, 2, 3, 4, which are, so who said, yeah, go ahead, tell us. 1 and 4. Every day I eat an apple, and I eat an apple every day, but not, yeah, go ahead.
I would only say, I say it only 4.
Only 4. So you wouldn't say every day, you don't feel that you would say. How many people feel that you might say number 1? And how many might say number 2? And how many might say number 3? How many might say number 4? There's tremendous uniformity, right? It's really easy to get this kind of uniformity of judgments with a simple task like this. So I want to point out a kind of notation. An asterisk in linguistics means this is not good. This is not part of the language, or in some way we're quoting it, but it's not really part of the language. Okay, here's another little example like that. 2 sentences. Sandy promised Chris to return the DVD. And Sandy ordered Chris to return the DVD. In number 1, who returns the DVD? Sandy. And in number 2, who returns the DVD? Chris. How do you know? Did someone teach you this?
Because promise is a word related to oneself, and order is a word related to another person.
Yes, okay, right. And so what you're saying then is that this is part of the meaning of promise and of an order, right? And I think that's right? But you didn't learn that from a dictionary, and you didn't learn that from someone saying, when you were a kid, you used them the wrong way, and someone said, no, you must not say it that way, you have to interpret it this other way, right? You just picked it up intuitively somewhere along the way as you were learning to speak English. Okay. How many of you are familiar with Homer Simpson? Okay. Yeah, I have the impression that it's not as totally pervasive in society nowadays as it was at one time, but I want you to listen to this. I don't know if the sound will be loud enough, but we'll try it. Can we make this louder? No. Okay, I'll play it once again in case you didn't hear it.
What I would give you your age to play another one of her dead too. What I would
Okay, so we're talking about the m in saxophone, which is an infix. So first I want to define a few terms. A prefix, and you know what a prefix and a suffix are. A prefix goes before the word, a suffix goes after the word. Some languages use infixes. They go inside the word. These are mainly, a lot of languages around the world, but most famously Indonesian and languages of the Pacific, including Hawaiian and all those others. So we're talking about an infix in English. English doesn't typically use infixes, but here's one. And so we could say saxophone, and we could say edumacation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would the infix be used?
Oh, just for a joke. No, more than that, I should say. Let me show you one more example from Dr. Seuss. Then he grunts, I will call you by whispermophone for the secrets I tell you or for your ears alone. This is actually quite old, early 20th century, and it was originally used as a way of mocking people immigrants who couldn't speak English well. It was it was mocking mainly German-speaking immigrants at the time, and African Americans, as if their English wasn't good. So it appears in newspaper columns mocking that kind of English way back. But no, it doesn't. In Indonesian, it may have some grammatical meaning that's part of the routine language. In English, it's just a joke.
Does the infix always have to be ma or
Loads of different infixes in different languages. I mean, in this particular case that we're looking at, it's always ma. But there are, loads of different ones in different languages.
Is the placement of the infix important?
The placement of the infix is exactly what I want to talk about for the next while. I have 4 little case studies. The biggest one has to do with the placement of this infix. If we don't get to another one after that, it's all right. If we get to some of the others, we will. Okay, so I want you to think now about where you would put the ma in these words. Okay, I'm going to wait a moment until everybody has settled their feeling for this.
I want to add a ma.
You want to add a ma of the kind of saxophone. Okay, tell us what you're feeling about the first one, feudalism.
I would say feudalism.
Okay, what would you say?
Feudalism.
Okay, and what would you say?
feudalism.
And
So I think that it would make sense to place the infix after the root of the word. So be it feudalism, which is derived from feud in some sort of sense. Then you could say like feudalism, or like in secretary we have secret or something. Like you could have secretary.
so you said an interesting thing. You said after the root, and the root is feud, and therefore you pronounced the word how?
Feudalism.
So you added, if it was literally after feud, it would be feudalism. You actually pronounced it feudalism, which I think is the way you pronounced it. Yeah.
I think it sounds cooler after like 2 syllables for all.
2 syllables.
After 2 syllables. Okay, we're making real progress here. That's our first hypothesis as to the principle that would govern it.
I don't think I have a similar one. I don't think it's after 2 syllables. I think it's before 1 syllable. So that there's 1 syllable.
There has to be 1 syllable after the word.
So if this was like a 4-syllable word, it would be after 3 syllables.
Before the last syllable. Okay, different hypothesis. Okay, here I'll get to you in a moment, but this is beautiful. This is how scientific thinking works. We have a few facts, a few bits of data. You have 2 different hypotheses. Will we be able to find some more data that would resolve the question, whether it's that or something else maybe? Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't like there's if we're using roots, then it doesn't have to be a certain syllable structure. For example, with like territory, it could be terramatory.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm interrupting, but I wanted to say that we have three hypotheses: after two syllables, before one syllable, or after the root. Three different hypotheses. Yes. I'm sorry. Continue.
I mean, that's all I have to say.
Okay. Yeah.
Another hypothesis would be just by sound, right? So like Dama, Rima. Like you're looking for a place where you get a staccato of
A certain rhythm. You're looking for, so these three hypotheses have to do with rhythm in some sense. Your hypothesis has to do with meaningful structures in some sense. Yeah.
I think it might be the root, and then if there's a vowel after the root, it's after that.
Include the vowel and then
But generally, I don't think it would be placed like inside a syllable. So I think even if Alex's hypothesis is correct and it's after a root, it would still be after a syllable. So I think it's a syllable-based structure.
so it's root and whatever syllable that root ends in. That's okay. We're getting more sophisticated hypotheses
I
here.
have a new one. Thinking it might be the first syllable, or the first syllable, or maybe the first two. But I think it's always after a vowel in most cases. A whisperophone is like that.
I'm sorry. Which one?
Whisperophone is after.
Whisperophone. It's after a consonant. And to me, whisperophone doesn't really feel as comfortable as the other ones. I don't know if that's. Well, but let me ask then. Feudalism. Okay, how many people say, I'm going to do it this way. This is what I think you would do. How many people feel that this is what you would do with these words? Very close, maybe unanimous judgments on that. Okay, good. So let's do a few more. Think about where you would place it. Some of these are harder. Okay, the first one. Who's going to give us the telephone? Go ahead.
Telephone?
All right. How many people like telephone? The next one, Canada. Someone different. Someone else. Go ahead. Yeah. Canada. How many people like Canada? Wonderful. Who'll do that? A different person. Yeah. Wonderful. How many people like that? Most. Okay. Venomous. That's a really hard one. Yeah, go ahead. Venomous. Okay. Yeah, how many people like that? And the next one? Cinema. Which, you had a tendency to switch one of the M's to an N just to make it easier to pronounce when you first said it that way, right? Yeah, because this is really kind of weird. So in general, the most people go for this breakdown that is what you all agreed on.
So like Canada doesn't really have a root per se. So does the fact that placement support the hypothesis that it's before one syllable? Or
That either before one syllable or after two syllables, but not depending on the root. Because if it depended on the root, and if we say that Canada all is one thing, and it's its own root, then you'd have to say, what would you have to say? Canada, right?
It's not an infix.
And then it's not an infix, but so what? I mean, terminology doesn't matter. That.
So if this infix is used to mock, then you have
Originally, I think now.
But if you have then you have to have in front before the infix you have something that has a meaning, right? Because otherwise nobody understands it, right?
Yeah.
If they see ma nema, maybe you don't even recognize.
You don't have enough of the word to get what was intended before it's decomposed or whatever. Yeah. Okay, so so it can't be all the way in. So let's look back at saxophone. Now, if you look at that word in terms of spelling, there are that many different imaginable spots. If you look at it in terms of pronunciation, it's a little different because X is really k, s, and because the E at the end is silent. We're going to deal with spelling now because it's easier, but you just have to bear in mind that those are slightly different. And there are, I think, 10 different possible places for it. So think about these. Are there more, is it more than one that might work?
Smacks.
So Helmut's observation immediately tells us that number 1 is going to be impossible, probably 2 and maybe 3 or 4 are impossible. So you don't have enough of the word before you get the ma to recognize it. Yeah?
For number 6, saxophone, would that be like, how, did I pronounce it right?
Well, so this is fake. This is fake. So I'm dealing with, I'm representing the words in terms of spelling here, which gives us a fake result. That is, PH in English, in this, many words, is just f. It's only one sound, so that's not even a realistic candidate at all. In general, in linguistics, we call this kind of thing a set of candidates, and then you may have principles in your language that choose the best optimal candidate. That's the term that's used. Yeah.
I think one that works sort of well, but not as good as the original is 3.
Number 3, saxophone.
It's not as good. It doesn't sound as good as 5.
But it's a maybe possible. Actually, I think once we get a little further, we'll see why that's not as awful.
2 is also okay.
Yeah.
2, smaxophone. Okay.
I think 1 and 10 are possible, but it changes the meaning significantly.
Saxophone.
Well, they're neither of them are infixes.
They're not infixes, but okay. I mean, we should never let terminology get in the way of the data, right? Yeah.
I feel like 7 could also work.
Saxophone. Say it.
One.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I would actually add this as a market, right? Because if you don't understand what a saxophone is,
Okay.
then you would mock somebody that you just use the letters.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed is that there's usually a space before and after the ma. So you probably, if the phrase is in the infix, requires you to blend it with the letters on the other side, so maybe that's not good.
Space, you don't mean in writing, you mean in pronunciation?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So actually, let me do this. So in English, words have accent or stress, right, in certain syllables. If we look at saxophone, it's easy to count syllables. Saxophone, there are 3. But which ones are stressed? Saxophone, right? The first and the third. Usually English speakers find it pretty easy to identify the places where there is stress. Now, there are also unstressed syllables that go with the stressed ones, like saxa. That unit is called a foot. And you may, if you ever, if in English class you looked at poetry and you learned about different types of feet, how many people learned about iambic and so on kinds of feet in dealing with poetry? Okay, it's the same idea that actually works in our language. And so I think what you're identifying is the boundaries between feet. So saxa and then phone, those are 2 different feet. I think the spaces that you're talking to. Okay, so mostly people settle on number 5 as the best one, and maybe the others are kind of marginal. Some of the others are marginal, right?
Saxophone.
Smaxophone. Yeah.
But it has 2 A's. That's kind of weird.
Yes, it has to be smaxophone. Smaxophone, right?
But that doesn't sound good.
Saxophone also.
Saxophone sounds actually good.
Which is that?
Saxophone.
Yeah. So you can jiggle some of them, but I think we had, we didn't ask this one, but how many people feel that number 5 is the best one? Okay, good. Very close to unanimous. Okay, so what's the hypothesis so far? We've had a few hypotheses. We don't have to look at it more. I want to give you a bit of notation, and for that, I'm going to use a little example from Russian. So there are loads and loads of Russian nicknames. There's many ways to make nicknames in Russian, but this is one that's very, very prevalent. Masha, Lena, Nadia, Dima, and so on. And what they have in common, no matter what the original basic form, the full form of the name is, all these nicknames of this type are 2 syllables. The first one is stressed, and the last one is a, right? The notation that we use is, how nice, sigma for syllable. This is a stressed syllable, and it's followed by a. So that's the template that this type of Russian nicknames falls into, right? That's what determines it. The vowels, the consonants can be a lot of different things, but that pattern, stressed syllable plus that's how you identify these. Okay, we're going to look at more ma infixation, but we'll use the sigma in a few moments. Let's do a couple of, let's move on. Let's look at these. The first one, what would you say for that? Yeah? Sophisticated? How many people like that?
Yeah.
Anybody have a different preference?
Sophisticated?
Sophisticated.
I can hardly even do that. Say it again?
Sophisticated?
Sophisticated. We'll go on to the next one in a moment. What does that do for the theory that it's before the last syllable? You can have more syllables, right? All right, what about the next word? I'm unsophisticated. Where do you like that? Go ahead.
Unsophisticated.
Unsophisticated, which just builds on sophisticated. Is there a different way to do it? Unsophisticated?
That kind of works, actually.
Does it work for you?
Unsophisticated.
That's the one I was thinking is another possibility. Unsophisticated, right? Is that what you said? Unsophisticated.
Yeah.
Right. What does that do for the theory that it's after 2 syllables? In other words, for this word, some people say it's okay to put it there, and I think everybody was happy with it over there. What's going on here? Go ahead.
I guess it's the root, but it's also not the root because then the root would be so, but maybe it's the before suffixes.
Okay, so ignore suffixes and put it before the suffixes.
I don't know.
I think it might have to do with pronunciation more than like how it's spelled, like pronunciation more than semantics. Like it has to do with the stress parts. It's because saxophone is between the 2 stressed parts.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with
So it's saxa is 1 foot, and then phone is another foot. You put it between. What you called earlier, you called the space that you feel between.
I think like if there's a word that has like the infix place in it, then if you add a suffix or a prefix, you can do it 2 ways. The way it would be if the suffix is considered part of the word, and the way it would be without the suffix.
So the expanded word builds on the basic word.
But like unsophisticated is one of the same infix placements as sophisticated, but it also adds another one with the placement of sounds.
So yes, that's really important. I'm going to combine it with that. How many stress accents are there in unsophisticated? I think there are, well, you think?
Sophisticated.
The fis is one,
Sophisticated.
but then the second word in the,
A.
you have it on un, right? We say unsophisticated, unsophisticated. So we have two feet. One is unsa, and the other is fista, and you can put it after either one.
Unsophisticated.
Unsa. Yes, that's what she said, right? Yeah.
Unsophisticated. Okay.
Right after unsa or after fista. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move on to. I mean, you can think about these on your own or any words that you like. Think about these for a moment, one or two of these.
So for careful, I know this is changing the pronunciation of the word a bit, but I would say caramel.
So you've added caramel. Let me say that again, caramel. You've added a little in there, so it's caramel. So you've created exactly the kind of foot structure that that was already in the original words, right? Cara is stressed, unstressed, syllable, foot, right? Then, and so you had, for a word that doesn't work, basically careful doesn't work, but you had a repair strategy, which we do in human languages, in order to find a way to make it possible to do this. All right. You get the idea of a repair strategy? In these cases, it was adding an Let's look at some even more yeah.
I want to try it with graveyard. I would say grave my yard.
Grave in my yard.
Grave my yard.
No, not grave on my yard, but grave my yard.
Grave my yard. Okay, what do you think of that? How many people are comfortable with grave my yard?
Yeah.
A few, some, maybe half the group.
I don't think it's funny.
I don't know, a graveyard's funny.
I mean, it's supposed to be funny. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like there's the kind of the tone is held with grave in my yard and not with grave in my yard.
With the repair strategy of putting in the extra right. Let's look at some more mind-blowing ones.
Tuba. That does not work.
What would you do?
Is it possible that these words cannot use an infix? For example, like tuba seems like a foot in itself.
It's a foot in itself, tuba, right? It's a perfect iambic foot, right? Iambic is stressed, unstressed, heavy, light. Dum is iambic, and this tuba is, and oboe is a good iambic feet all by themselves. It's possible that you will just say, I can't do it with this word at all.
Tamauba.
Ooh. Say it again.
Tamauba.
Yes.
Whoa. Tubama? Okay. How many people, I'll come to that. How many people are comfortable with tubama? A few, 2, 3, 4. How many people are comfortable? Say yours again.
Tubamamba.
Tubamamba? How many people are happy with that? Tubamamba.
But that's adding extra syllables.
Yes.
So that's another repair strategy, right? Which is to reduplicate, meaning make a copy of the b syllable of tuba and paste it after the ma so that we get the required structure. Yeah, that's another repair strategy. It's called reduplication because you take a piece and duplicate it and add it. And same languages that tend to use infixation also tend to use reduplication a lot. Yeah?
Tumaba.
Tumaba. Happy with that?
How about tubama oboe?
Oh. Oh.
For oboe.
Okay, say it again.
For oboe. Oamabo.
Oamabo. Oh, so again, you inserted the so it's oa maba. That kind of works for me. Oa maba.
Obama.
So what a lot of people do is the same reduplication, obomabo. Or some people do it a little differently, and so that's reduplication, right? Because we reduplicated the bo. Maybe I should do that. Some people will do it that way. I'm leaving out the E from the spelling. Some people will do it slightly differently, similar to this, but a little differently. Anybody like obamabo? So the symbol in phonetics for that sound is this. It's a reversed E. And which repair strategy is that? This is reduplication. This is inserting that sound. Okay, so what's the, you can look at all of these later on. Here's the, well, before we do that, I want to look at one, which was that, yeah, look at multiplication. Where would you put it there? Yeah, go ahead.
Multiplication.
Multiplication, yeah. How many people like multiplication? A few, half, maybe a little more than half, yeah.
Are there any like repair strategies for prefixes or suffixes?
Yes. Yes, there are.
Like what would be an example?
Well, an example, and I'm making it up because I don't have a real example in my mind. Let's say your prefix consists of a vowel, and your suffix, and the word starts with a vowel, and you're not comfortable in your language putting two vowels together, which some languages don't like. Sometimes you insert a consonant in between them. Something like that is actually the English So if you say a book, right, it's just But if the next word starts with a vowel, like apple, right, mostly we don't say apple. Mostly we say an apple, and you can view that N as a repair strategy for that matchup.
I heard that some British people use r in between two words.
Yes.
So that one ends in the vowel and the other begins.
Yes, intrusive R, and some people in other R-dropping English-speaking areas, like Boston is famous for that kind of thing. I don't know if I can think of an example now. Anyway, I want to show you, so multiplication, what's the issue with multiplication? What's the novelty in that as an example, as a piece of data? Well, in the pronunciation, multiplication.
What about multiplication?
Okay, multiplication is pretty good because it follows a multa, which is exactly the iambic foot that we've identified. So why is multiplication a new thing?
Is the foot like extended to 3 syllables?
It's extended, and that's exactly the word that I have on the slide that I'm going to show you. So the typical iambic disyllabic 2-syllable foot, which is a basic English pattern. It shows up all over in English and other Germanic languages. The disyllabic 2-syllable foot, with the first one being stressed. We also have in words like multiplication, or even multiplication, we have the extended disyllabic foot, or you could call it the maximal foot. Yeah.
How about multiplication?
Say it again.
Multiplication.
Oh, how many people like that one?
Can you say it again?
Multiplication.
Formation.
Yeah, I like that.
You like that?
I like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, a few people like that. this is, of course, well, okay, that's a good point, actually. 99 point something native speakers of English from the same general region speak pretty much the same. But there may be differences, and there always are, some slight differences among people, and probably your mental grammar, that is the mental structure that represents your language, that tells you how to use your language, is slightly different even among speakers from the same area. Anyway, so the Homeric infixation rule in general, the most commonly accepted form, ma is infixed after this kind of syllable, strong, weak, or accented, unaccented. Possibly, the parentheses means optional, an extra unaccented syllable. In other words, a maximal disyllabic trochaic foot, but not trochaic, iambic. Trochaic's the opposite. Whoops, sorry. No, wait, I'm wrong. I've been reading my slides, which I wrote wrong. These are trochaic, right? Look, if you studied poetry, iambic is da-dum, 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 right? These are trochaic feet. And I wrote the wrong word on all the slides up to this point. Okay, these are trochaic feet, sorry. But the rule also says it can't be at the end of the word. So oboma generally was not happy.
What does it mean that they're trochaic?
Trochaic means, so we have, if you have two feet that are made of two syllables, you can have two kinds. There's the sigma, this kind, and that kind. This is trochaic, and that kind's iambic, and I'm really embarrassed because the video is going to show me using the wrong term. But okay, these are terms that come from ancient Greek poetry. Greek scholars thought about their poetry, and they realized that they had a number of different kinds of feet, and they gave Greek names to those different types of feet. Anyway, yes?
It says but not at the end of the word, but recently, I think like within the past 1 or 2 years, people started adding ma to the end of some verbs.
Like what?
Okay. So one of them is ligma.
What does that mean?
I don't want to say what it means because it's actually not very appropriate, but yeah, some people
clearly recognize it, but I don't. Okay.
It's actually where sigma came from.
Yeah.
I guess I'm supposed to end now and allow questions, right? I can go a little more, or should I? A little more. I want to show you one other phenomenon, right? We did that one. This is from Appalachian English, so Southern American white English in the states that you see there mainly. And I think you'll recognize this, although probably none of us speak this way, right? He just kept a begging and a crying and a wanting to go out. So it's the that we're talking about. I know he was a telling the truth, but I was a coming home. Recognize it? Pretty much, I mean, you've heard it, but we don't speak this way. Anybody speak this way normally? Okay. So the question is, when can you insert the and when can you not? So I'm going to move a little faster. Which of these seem good to you and which do not seem good? Now let's let everybody think a little bit. Well, let's do it one by one. He likes a hunting. Good? You like that? A hunting is fun.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hunting is fun. The 10 living children are home.
What about the 10 dead children?
I hope they're not at home. I'm going to go to the last two. He watched their shooting.
There or them?
There.
No.
He watched them shooting.
Yes.
What's going on here? We have this unanimous, almost probably unanimous opinion about a dialect that we don't speak. But we've heard it. We all know it. Okay. Yes, your judgments, I think, were on, although there was some disagreement about one or two of them. How about these?
sick from a word. No.
Anybody like these?
No.
The first is sort of okay. He got sick from a working so hard.
No.
He makes money by a building houses.
No.
Bad. I'm going to move on. Really, yeah. Okay, let's do these. He was a discovering a bear in the woods. He was a manipulating things. John was a eating his food.
Yes.
I heard some yeses, some no's. He kept asking the question.
No.
Close to unanimous opinion. Here's the rule. In Appalachian English, you can add the to a word that ends in ing, provided it's a verb, not a noun or an adjective. So like not, a hunting is fun, noun, not a crying child, adjective. But it has to start with a stressed syllable, and it has to end with a consonant. Yeah, we saw, did we see? Yeah. Was there one? Maybe I didn't show an example of that. Start with a consonant. That's what I meant. The slide is right. I was wrong. Yes, it has to start with a consonant. So eaten is not good. Right? We knew this. How did we know this? We knew it from, a few movies maybe that we saw. Probably most of you have not interacted with a person who actually speaks this way. But you've seen some movies and you've heard people speak this. The brain does this amazing thing. It picks up patterns like this. And patterns, these are fairly abstract. We were talking about feet that have certain stress patterns. We were here talking about nouns, verbs, and adjectives and stress patterns and so on. These are really abstract elements.
So the funny part about movies is that they're often played by Californian actors, right, that imitate that. Like, how often does it happen that you pick up something completely wrong about an accent because they're not careful, right? Because why they don't speak this way?
Right.
Is there...
That's an interesting question. I'm sure that if it was our own English and we heard someone who was not a speaker of it imitating it, we would pick up mistakes, right?
Linguists on staff.
What I'm showing you here is taken from data from actual recordings of Appalachian speakers. But yet, we got it, we knew it. Okay, I'm going to take another minute to show you another one. Can I do that? Yeah, okay. So in African American English, African American vernacular English, which is spoken by some, not all, black people, and those and those people some of the time, not all of the time, mainly within the community. You know that you can drop the normal English B, so you can say, she the first one starting us off, right? Sort of sounds familiar. He fast in everything he do. Kind of familiar? Okay. Notice that you can't, you can't always omit it. So here I am, no African American would ever say, here I, even though he could say, I in the school. That would be okay, but here I is not good. How beautiful you. Or, are you going? Yes, I. No, those are all not possible. And I think if we took the time to probe our intuitions, we'd agree on those.
I think for that last one, the second B, it should not be omitted, but the first one.
The first B in the last example, he is nice, that's fine, right? As they say he, that's bad, right? Okay, beautiful. These are detailed intuitions about a dialect that we don't speak. Why? In standard English or more general English, you can do contractions, but you can't do contractions all the time. So you can do the contraction, we're on tape, and African American speakers can do the dropping, we on tape. We cannot do the contraction, here I'm, where are you? Here I'm. That doesn't work. In exactly the same situations, it's not possible in African American vernacular English to omit the be, the form of be. I can't go into the structures, the sentence structures that determine this in each case. Yet, what I want to point out is that these are patterns no one ever taught you. Certainly no one ever taught how to speak African American vernacular English consciously in school or anything like that. No one was corrected for speaking it wrong. But we pick up these patterns, and they are what our language does. So I can't show you the Russian and the Arabic and Hebrew because we don't have time for those. Thanks.
The omission of the verb to be is similar to Russian.
Yes.
Russians don't do it.
And instead, we say this is non-standard in English, but in Russian, it's the norm. It's the way you do it. Yes. So there's nothing illogical about it. Yeah. Although in graduate school, I had a roommate who was Russian and a mathematician. And he used to say, his English was pretty good, but he used to say, definite and indefinite articles, and the, he said, if Russian doesn't need them and math doesn't need them, you don't need them.
So like in Russian, instead of having something like here I or how beautiful are you would have I here or how you beautiful.
Can you say it in the form here I? What ya? Can you say that?
Well, you could probably say
What ya?
yes, this.
Yes, this. Yeah, is this ya?
It sounds like better when the subject is first.
I mean,
It's first.
both can work though.
So instead of I am here, basically, you say I here.
How about if you want to say someone is on the porch, and you say on the porch is me. Can you say that in Russian? I don't know what the word for porch is.
Yeah, you would say with the subject first.
Could you put the ya after?
So I on the deck.
Yeah.
You don't say I am on the deck.
Well, it doesn't sound great, but you can do it.
You could do it.
Why don't we thank the speaker?
Thanks.